Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kathy Meinzer, and I'm Executive Director of the Workforce Solutions Group. We're a statewide coalition working to increase access and resources for job training, workforce development, and vocational technical education in Massachusetts. Our work is led by the E-Team, shown in the program book, and the link is in the chat. We are pleased to have both them and our supporting sponsors here with us today. The past 19 months have cracked open our lives and culture as never before. Envisioning the future of work in 2019, we never would have pictured the following: 200,000 jobs lost in our state almost overnight, childcare centers closed indefinitely, shortages of both labor and supplies constricting our economy, and urgency around racial equity and justice not seen since the 1960s. And now billions of federal relief dollars coming to our states. What will we create from these unique factors? Going forward, we ask you to hold these values in mind. First, racial equity is access and opportunity for every student and adult. If a disparity exists, it must be fixed. And good data is the first step towards identifying disparities. Second, job quality is job retention. People stay longer at jobs that they enjoy and feel decently compensated at. Third, early education and care are the cornerstone of a healthy labor market, and we're pleased to hear more about efforts to expand access to childcare later in the program. Lastly, training and stipends must go hand in hand. Expecting people to go through weeks of full-time training without any income is unrealistic. It is our hope that the pandemic leads to better career ladders for frontline workers, a stable workforce system that can respond to economic hills and valleys, robust employer partnerships, and funding streams that support the real-life needs of students and workers. Our program today will highlight efforts to make this vision real, and we invite you to join with us. A quick program update: Secretary Walsh is unable to join us this morning as he's on a flight, probably working to get Build Back Better over the finish line, but he has sent us a special guest from the Department of Labor who will be joining us shortly. And now I'm pleased to introduce Lauren Jones from the Mass Business Roundtable. Lauren?
Good morning. I'm Lauren Jones with the Massachusetts Business Roundtable and a member of the Workforce Solutions Group. The Roundtable is comprised of CEOs and senior executives from large employers spanning industries statewide. We are a member-driven organization focused on advancing public policy with the goal of strengthening the state's competitiveness and economic prosperity for all. What is one issue that you think is top of mind to our members? Well, without a doubt, it is talent. Talent attraction and retention, talent development, and talent diversity were issues employers faced before the pandemic. But like so many facets of our economy that Kathy spoke to, these issues have been compounded in the past 19 months and continue to rise to the top as companies operate in new work environments. Regardless of size, from small businesses to large employers, we know that access to diverse talent, good paying jobs, and pathways to meaningful careers are just a few of the critical components in building an equitable recovery. I am honored to invite all of you to join me in welcoming a distinguished guest this morning. On behalf of Secretary Marty Walsh and the U.S. Department of Labor, we are thrilled to welcome Acting Assistant Secretary of Employment and Training Assistance, Angela Hanks. Assistant Secretary Hanks oversees many of the department's employment, unemployment insurance, and training programs, resources that we all care about. She has been tasked by the Biden-Harris administration to ensure our programs within ETA advance the administration's workforce development, job quality, and equity goals. Prior to joining DOL in January of this year, Assistant Secretary Hanks was Deputy Executive Director of the Groundwork Collaborative, where she worked to advance an inclusive and people-centered vision of the economy. She has also held roles as Director of Workforce Development Policy at the Center for American Progress, Director of the Center for Post-Secondary Education and Success at CLASP, and at the National Skills Coalition, where she wrote extensively about how education and training programs and the labor market more broadly can be more inclusive of people of color, women, justice-involved individuals, and other marginalized groups, and on other topics including racial wealth inequality and criminal justice reform. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Assistant Secretary Angela Hanks.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you for having me here to speak today to the Massachusetts Jobs and Workforce Summit about the latest initiatives and priorities of the Department of Labor's Employment and Training Administration and the just and equitable recovery you're leading here in Massachusetts. I'm really excited to be here on behalf of Secretary Walsh. I know he wishes he could have been here today. We're so grateful for his leadership at DOL. As I'm sure many of you know, he lives his values every day, and I'll discuss in a bit more detail what that's meant for the department in terms of how we are working to empower workers each day. So here at the Department of Labor, everything we do is based in worker-centered vision that starts with President Biden and Vice President Harris. While the Biden-Harris administration's American Rescue Plan, or ARPA, changed the course of the pandemic and delivered relief for millions of working families, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the Build Back Better agenda, which I'll say are perhaps at this point better known as the Infrastructure and Reconciliation bills, are an investment to help America build back better, creating millions of jobs, rebuilding our country's infrastructure, and reducing the impacts of climate change. The administration's Build Back Better agenda includes investing in training programs that will prepare millions of workers for high-quality jobs in growing sectors, and creating clean energy jobs to tackle the climate crisis and advance environmental justice. And equity is at the heart of all the administration's efforts. The administration aims to rebuild a new American economy, an economy that invests in the promise and potential of every American, an economy that leaves no one out and no one behind, an economy that makes it easier for families to break into the middle class and stay in the middle class. To that end, on the first day of his administration, President Biden signed the executive order on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities through the federal government. This executive order, among many things, directs agencies to promote equitable delivery of benefits and opportunities across federal programs. As I mentioned, we're very lucky to have Secretary Walsh's leadership here at the department, and he does lead the department through his lived experiences, and leaders across the department carry his priorities into all of our work. Secretary Walsh's vision for the department is to empower all workers, morning, noon, and night. Workers everywhere can expect the Department of Labor to act boldly on their behalf throughout every part of their working life. That means valuing and investing in the care economy and addressing the care needs of workers and their families in ways that allow them to thrive in their jobs. It means building a modern and inclusive workforce and ensuring workers have good jobs and opportunities for advancement and seats at the table. And it means providing some peace of mind that one setback doesn't destroy a family's well-being, that you can save for retirement, continue to access affordable health care, and get support for transitions in your career. At the Employment and Training Administration, ETA, where I sit, we seek to empower workers and job seekers and help employers hire people into quality jobs. And within ETA and across the administration, equity is really at the core of what we do. ETA provides labor market information to identify in-demand occupations. We support workforce development programs to enhance worker and job seeker skills. We help foster employment opportunities by connecting job seekers with businesses. And we support income maintenance to support workers when they most need it as they transition careers, among other services and supports that we provide. And as you know, these services are delivered primarily through state and local delivery systems, and we rely really deeply on our partnerships on the ground to ensure that we're using our federal dollars to create and scale quality programs. Now more than ever, these services are critical to supporting an equitable economic recovery. We're living in unprecedented times as a result of the national public health emergency caused by the novel coronavirus pandemic and the resulting economic downturn. We've been providing the critical safety net that individuals have needed during the pandemic through various programs here at the department. And many of you have been at the center of vital pandemic responses in your communities over the last year and a half. The pandemic has caused the world to change, especially the world of work, in ways that we never anticipated. As a system, we've pivoted to a virtual environment to continue providing critical services. And I know it sounds like just last week, Massachusetts has been able to open up American Job Centers, which is really exciting development and hopefully a harbinger for good things to come. And as we begin to climb out of that economic downturn, we will need to support workers, job seekers, and employers in different ways, from a resumption of in-person support to continued remote supports, and in many cases, a combination of both. Many businesses from small to large have help wanted signs. And at the same time, we know that many workers are still struggling to find quality employment or critical supports or access to critical supports like childcare that they need to return to work. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics' recent job openings and labor turnover summary, or JOLTS, job openings increased in several industries, with the largest increases in healthcare, social assistance, finance and insurance, accommodation, and food services. In fulfilling its mission, ETA is advancing key priorities in support of the Secretary's vision to empower all workers morning, noon, and night. ETA has also overseen the implementation of new unemployment insurance programs and expansion of existing programs through the CARES and American Rescue Plan Acts, or ARPA. These programs have helped Americans put food on the table, pay for their medication, and pay their rent and mortgage. ETA is working to improve UI delivery using ARPA funds to promote equitable access to UI, to ensure timely benefits, and to reduce fraud in the unemployment insurance system. To do so, we're doing a few things, many things, but I'll just name a few. So first, we're sending multidisciplinary, what we're calling tiger teams, to individual states to address immediate needs within ARPA focus areas. This includes improvement to customer services and equity, operational processes for more timely benefit delivery, and the reduction of backlogs, and improve fraud prevention and detection. We've also procured ID verification services to help states reduce fraud. We're ensuring that workers without internet and computer access have access to an alternative means of ID verification, and providing service in claimants' native languages and meeting accessibility standards for workers with disabilities. We've also announced that we'll award $700 million in grants to promote our goals on equity, timeliness, and fraud prevention. That includes $200 million in state equity grants to advance equity in UI program access. These funds will help states improve program awareness for communities experiencing barriers to access. It will streamline the application process and develop an understanding of the equity challenges that need to be addressed through new data collection and analysis. All states will have the opportunity to apply for the first two programs, the Tiger Teams grants and equity grants, and many states have already been awarded grants through the fraud initiatives that I mentioned. In addition to that, we are also overseeing critical investments in workforce development focused on quality jobs in key industries. These investments will provide services to individuals from historically marginalized communities and expand industry partnerships like the ones we're here to discuss today. ETA is renewing its focus on ensuring high quality registered apprenticeship programs and adding 1 to 2 million new registered apprenticeship slots over the next 10 years. To do so, ETA just a few weeks ago reestablished the Advisory Committee on Apprenticeship. We held our first meeting earlier this month to explore priorities for the upcoming year, including diversity, equity, and inclusion in registered apprenticeships, expansion into new industries, and modernizing the registered apprenticeship system. We also launched the Registered Apprenticeship Technical Centers, Assistance Centers of Excellence, which will provide TA to employers in key industry areas. The centers will work across public and private partnerships to expand registered apprenticeships opportunities for women, for youth, for people of color, for rural communities, justice-involved individuals, and people with disabilities. We also launched the state expansion and apprenticeship, state apprenticeship expansion, equity, and innovation grants. It's a little bit of a mouthful, I'm sorry, to expand registered apprenticeships for underserved communities. We've also partnered with the Women's Bureau here at DOL to launch the Women in Non-Traditional in Apprenticeship and Non-Traditional Occupations Grant Program to fund community-based organizations to develop apprenticeship opportunities for other non-traditional skills training programs for women. Grantees will also provide support services to improve the retention of women in these fields. We're also investing in the continued growth of apprenticeships focused on key industries in the care occupations in the care economy. So that's healthcare, early childhood education, and others. Strategies will include launching funding opportunities for additional industry intermediaries and the promoting of public-private partnerships. For example, in September, ETA announced funding for up to 4 new contracts to industry intermediaries. These intermediaries will launch, promote, and expand registered apprenticeship models in critical industries impacted by the pandemic and in several targeted sectors, including care economy sectors serving individuals, families, the elderly, persons with disabilities, to provide community food and housing, vocational rehabilitation services, and childcare services. This past June, ETA also launched the Career National Dislocated Worker Grants that focus on workers from historically marginalized communities or groups and those who have been unemployed for an extended period or have exhausted their UI benefits. We're also committed to rebuilding and enhancing Job Corps as it connects students to quality job opportunities in the care economy. This program's increasing enrollment will produce more young people prepared to thrive in these occupations. Job Corps will also continue to explore new ways to connect a unique cross-section of underserved youth in the care economy, including through new and existing partnerships with care providers. In addition, the Build Back Better agenda, which I mentioned earlier, is perhaps also known as the Reconciliation Bill, calls for an historic investment in workforce development. This historic investment will be guided by a set of 3 core principles. The first is quality jobs. That means orienting our workforce investment around supporting and growing good jobs in critical industry sectors. The president knows, and this administration is committed to making sure that all of our other goals to rebuild America, including combating climate change and making infrastructure investments in roads, bridges, broadband care, clean energy, and more, are also opportunities to create good jobs in the communities that need them most. The second is racial equity. This means combating the structural barriers to opportunity so that all Americans have a fair shot to participate. Whether it's transportation, childcare, or working with our employer and partners to build inclusive workforces, equity is at the center of what we do on workforce. And then the third is partnerships between employers and workers. Quality job training is about bringing together employers across the sector, engaging worker voice, and forging close partnerships between labor and management. When employers and employees partner in shaping and investing in the skills of American workers, and when the workforce development system invests in and supports those types of partnerships, workforce development becomes less about one-off courses or skills deficiencies for individual workers and more about building the bridge between people and good jobs. Across the country, there are innovative partnerships in our workforce doing all 3. And I know we're discussing those partnerships today, but I'll just highlight a few that I think are doing similar things. Using labor management partnerships to train workers for quality jobs in an intentionally inclusive way. So prioritizing participants who are Black, Brown, Asian, LGBTQ, and experiencing homelessness or are precariously housed or formerly incarcerated. And states themselves play a critical role in expanding these opportunities. States can invest their workforce funds in supporting these partnerships. One example in California is the High Road Training Partnership model. That is something that our Deputy Secretary worked on when she was there, which identifies industries where labor and management are willing to come to the table and commit to good jobs, often union jobs, assess the skills needed for those jobs, and build training programs together that not only meet the needs, but train for the jobs of the future. States can also play a role in actively helping forage, support, and scale those partnerships to meet critical workforce needs in their states, as well as the workforce needs of the public sector. Another example are registered apprenticeships for early childhood education workers in Pennsylvania through the District 1199C Training and Upgrading Fund, which are leveraging WIOA dollars to deliver programs that boost job quality, bringing together the guarantees of apprenticeship to women of color and meeting a critical need for the state's economy. State agencies are also able to be a role model for the private sector by working with public sector unions to develop and upskill the public sector's own IT workforce, from California to New York City to Boston, through apprenticeships and community colleges partnerships. Putting equity and job quality at the center of how we build and support workforce partnerships that bring together employers and employees is critical, and who we partner with is critical. It will ensure that we will always start with the jobs first. The jobs that are here now, the jobs that are coming, so workers, including youth, are on a pathway to economic security and advancement. To make this work, we must also challenge ourselves to reassess how we measure success. It is not how many workers complete training or get placed that is primary. Success is measured by who we are serving and our ability to break down barriers of poverty, race, and exclusion, and the ability of those workers to secure good jobs, advance their careers, which will make employers in turn more successful, more diverse, and more competitive. Now is the time to be bold and fundamentally upend the traditional approach to workforce development. This is not just about building back, this is about building back better. The president, the secretary, and the department recognize that this transformative approach to workforce development demands investments in our states and communities. In order to advance many of those investments within the Build Back Better agenda, we are also calling, in addition to that, we are also calling for reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. We are committed to working with Congress and with all of you to reauthorize the nation's workforce system, which works to match the needs of employers and job seekers across the country. This past summer, Secretary Walsh testified before Congress, underscoring a few key priorities for reauthorization. So first is expanding access to quality training and services aligned to quality jobs. This means doubling down and putting investment behind proven training strategies, such as sector-based training, apprenticeships, community colleges, and reentry opportunities. The second is improving data transparency and accountability to promote equitable workforce outcomes. We will ensure we have the data and information we need to guide decisions by job seekers, employers, and policymakers to truly hold ourselves account on equity. And then last, better integration of systems to reach and deliver for workers in regional economies. We will continue to learn and evaluate and improve on the mission of WIOA to integrate systems, services, and promote innovation in service delivery. All of these policies and programs are supporting the administration and the Secretary's priorities and bolster ETA's efforts to empower workers and job seekers and help employers hire people into quality jobs. We're very thankful to all the policymakers, business, labor, education, and youth leaders here at the summit for all of the incredible work that you're doing in your communities each day. And we look forward to continuing to collaborate with you as we build back better. Thank you so much for having me. And I think we're going to have a couple of questions.
Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary. That was really fantastic and helpful to get such a wide breadth of the work that you're doing each and every day. And one of my questions I was going to actually start off with was if you could think of one or two leading examples, but I know you covered so many great things that you may not be able to pick just one as you cross the entire country. So maybe just narrowing down a little bit, you talked about registered apprenticeship, and are you seeing a lot of traction in that in some of the different regions as you go across the country? And is there a best practice within registered apprenticeship that you think would be noteworthy for Massachusetts policymakers and those on the line to be thinking about as we move forward in today's summit and beyond?
So I think the short answer is yes to both questions. So it's sort of been interesting. During the pandemic, we've seen, of course, some dip in enrollments, but I think not as much as you might expect. And so I think we feel pretty confident that the growth in apprenticeship is continuing apace, and we're seeing, every day new and innovative models. And like I mentioned, I think we are really thinking about how we can expand apprenticeship into new industries and with new populations that haven't had access to these programs before. So care is, of course, a big one, but there are many others. And so I think that is a potential area for growth that we're seeing already. And I think we are eager to help support through Build Back Better and through our existing authority as well. And then, I think just to highlight a couple of things that are happening now on the registered apprenticeship front. So I mentioned a few of the investments in Build Back Better. The National Apprenticeship Act is actually pending before Congress right now. So this would be the first reauthorization since the NAA was passed in 1937. That was quite a long time ago. And so we're really eager to sort of move forward, hopefully eventually with implementation of this law, because we know that registered apprenticeships are so critical. And part of our role, and I think part of our shared role, is both expanding these programs, but also ensuring quality as we do that. And that's an area where we really do rely on partnership in order to do that. And then the last thing I'll just make a plug for, because it's just a few weeks away, is National Apprenticeship Week is November 15th through the 21st. So if you go to apprenticeship.gov, I believe you can register events that you're hosting locally. I think we're up to about 250 events across the country right now. The Secretary will be participating in many events, both here in DC and across the country. So we're very excited about that. And we think it's a great way to highlight the value of the apprenticeship model and really bring in new folks into the fold and ensure that they're getting high quality jobs through apprenticeship.
Well, we love that plug here in Massachusetts, and I'm sure Secretary Acosta of our Labor and Workforce Development Department is eager to celebrate Registered Apprenticeship Week, as I know the Baker administration has celebrated in years past. So thank you for that. As we wrap up your session and time with us, which we really have appreciated, you spoke about the importance of partnerships, especially between employers and the workers. Kind of in your closing remarks here, knowing that there's so many people that invest in partnerships and collaboration that are attending today, how can we, or what message can we deliver to employers who are looking to be more collaborative and greater partners, because we know that in order to build back better, we need to have companies be partners. And we know that there are either companies in the summit or people that work with companies across our region. So what are your thoughts in closing remarks and thinking about how to engage with employers?
I'm so glad you asked this question. I think there are a few things. So first, I would say, partnerships are not only sort of useful for workforce development, I would go so far as to say they're essential. Like ultimately, we have no hope of creating good jobs, quality jobs, equitable access to employment if we're not engaging employers in those conversations. It is important for employers to be involved from the beginning because they can help shape training just in the same way that workers can help shape it as well. And they can ensure that it is, able to meet the needs that they have in their businesses. And so that partnership is really an essential component of us doing workforce development well. I can speak to a few things that we're doing on that front, but I'll highlight one because I think we're low on time. So I mentioned some of the investments that were initially proposed in the American Jobs Plan that have now sort of become part of the broader Build Back Better agenda. And one of those is sector-based training grants. And so this is an investment that really is designed to provide some capacity to bring all of those key partners to the table, which of course includes employers, to in specific industries to ensure that we're developing training programs that not only train people for jobs that are available and for good jobs that are available, but also provide the critical support services that we know people need both to access training and to eventually get to work. I think we see that, one investment as an important investment in and of itself, but I think as a kind of critical model that informs a lot of the other investments that we make across the department. And so I know that as we think about how to use federal resources and how to better support states and localities as they use the resources that we put out into the world, I think we see some of our core function is helping to promote those good models and helping to provide the resources and capacity to bring those partners together on the ground so they can create really high quality programs that produce equitable outcomes and lead to good jobs.
Well, thank you so much for carving out your morning to spend time in kicking off today's summit with us. Assistant Secretary Angela Hanks, thank you so much. And we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. And I did hear that you were also, the secretary was also your former boss as well. So I will make sure to tell him to say hello.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All right, thank you. Oh, and I see our ACH here, Dr. Ettinger. Okay, now I will go. Thank you so much.
Well, you're in good company. We appreciate you spending the morning with us. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
As we move on with our agenda, I would like to introduce a colleague of mine, Ruthie Lieberman of Empath, who also is on the Workforce Solutions Group E-team. Ruthie, please continue on.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ruthie Lieberman from Empath. We're a national nonprofit organization whose mission is to help individuals move to economic security. It's my great honor to introduce Assistant Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Katherine Clark. The Assistant Speaker is going to be updating us on her efforts to improve access to affordable, high-quality childcare. As you will hear, this is an issue that is near and dear to Congresswoman Clark. At WSG, we're familiar with her deep commitment to helping children and families succeed, as we worked with her often when she served in the Massachusetts Senate prior to her 2013 election to Congress. She's a vocal advocate for ending wage discrimination, protecting women's health care, paid family leave, safer schools, and other reforms that address challenges that women and families face. Her leadership and political skills have led to a quick rise to one of the highest positions in Congress. For all these reasons and more, I'm so proud that Congresswoman Clark represents me and my family in Congress. And now let's hear from the Assistant Speaker.
Hello, and thank you so much for inviting me to join the 12th Annual Massachusetts Job Workforce Summit. I'm thrilled to be part of this incredible lineup of speakers, including my friend and our Labor Secretary, Marty Walsh. The issues we are gathered together to discuss are what motivated my first run for Congress and what continue to be my North Star every day. Making sure every family has a fair shot at success. So much of this comes down to ensuring our workforce has the tools they need to both work and provide for their families. That's why our current agenda in Congress is so vital. Right now, the White House, Senate, and House are working every minute of every day to pass Build Back Better agenda, transformative legislation that will finally build an economy that works for everyone. Central to this bill is the care economy and an issue I've spent my life working on, childcare. As many of you know, the pandemic brought our fragile childcare system to a breaking point. Today, families struggle to find and afford care. Our providers struggle to stay open and remain staffed, and our economy feels these effects every day. Look no further than the September 2021 jobs report. All the net gain jobs went to men. That's right, 309,000 women left the labor force, bringing us to nearly 2.9 million jobs lost for women since the beginning of the pandemic. And the lack of care is at the heart of this crisis. The pandemic, thankfully, has forced a long overdue national reckoning. The reality is that the care economy has long been undervalued and underinvested in. When I was running for Congress, I was balancing care for 2 sick parents and 3 children. And I'm lucky I had the help of an incredible partner, a flexible schedule, and an ability to afford help. But too many families are forced to choose between caring for a loved one and a paycheck. It's time for a paradigm shift. We must finally recognize that childcare is an essential part of our economic infrastructure and is a public good. A recent study of Wealthy Nation shows that countries contribute an average of $14,000 per year per toddler. But here in the United States, it's just $500, and families are paying the price. In Massachusetts, over 300,000 children need childcare, but there's only 200,000 slots. This childcare gap is over 30%, and in 1 year alone, we can lose almost $8 billion in economic activity because of the childcare gap. And central to the equation are our workers, a workforce predominantly of women and women of color who shape the minds of the future and allow our entire economy to function. I held a town hall in 2019 where educators came who were working over 50 hours a week providing care for our families, but couldn't afford the basic care and necessities for their own. The average care worker makes minimum wage, yet their work is the glue that holds our economy together. This is outrageous, and the situation only worsened during the pandemic. Investing in our childcare facilities, providers, and staff will help us build the childcare infrastructure we need, and it is just as essential as any road and bridge. The Build Back Better agenda will tackle these challenges. It includes universal pre-K, national paid leave, historic investments in childcare and childcare facilities, a living wage for our early educators. We created the Build Back Better agenda, listening to families, to providers, to people like you who support our workforce every single day. The fact is, care can't wait. So where do we stand? Democrats continue to be in negotiations over the final package, and there is near universal understanding of the importance in investing in the care economy. While we continue to negotiate, we know that American families need and deserve urgent results. So I commit this to you. I'm not leaving our American workers and their families behind as we work to recover and rebuild. There's still work to be done to get this bill over the finish line, but we will make sure it will do the most good for the most people. As I continue my work in Washington, I ask you to keep up the momentum here at home. It's gatherings like this that keep the conversation alive in Washington. Keep telling your stories about how the child care crisis is impacting workers and our economy, and why it's so urgent that we make these investments in families and our education workforce. I'm so grateful for your work, ensuring Americans have the resources they need to live happy, healthy, and hopeful lives. And we help together, we can build that better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Clark, for those remarks. I quickly just want to apologize to everyone who probably joined us late. We were having some issues with Zoom, and so we do apologize. But this meeting is being recorded, so if you missed the first portion, you'll be able to see it on the recording. And with that, I want to introduce myself very quickly. My name is Tanya Metlock, and I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Workforce Association, and we're a longtime E-Team member of the Workforce Solutions Group. Next, we will hear from Sarah and Rick on the business case for higher wages and retention. Sarah has dedicated her career to connecting public and private sector leaders with frontline workers to build better businesses, create good jobs, and define stronger social policy. She serves as the Executive Director of the Good Jobs Institute, which inspires industry leaders to redefine what it means to run a successful business and help their companies thrive by creating good jobs. And Rick is the CEO of Optimax, a precision optics manufacturer in Ontario, New York. He has provided the leadership and vision over the past 25 years to grow Optimax from a small startup to America's largest precision optics manufacturer. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah and Rick.
Thank you so much. We are so thrilled to be here today talking about the business case for good jobs. As you mentioned, the Good Jobs Institute is a nonprofit based in Cambridge, and our mission is to help companies thrive by creating good jobs. So we work with companies mainly in the service sector who have large frontline workforces, so retail, restaurants, manufacturing, call centers, distribution centers, companies who really want to offer better jobs with higher wages, stronger schedule, stronger career paths, and they're just not sure how to get there in a way that's sustainable for their business. And I'm here today to tell you that the good news is that there is a path to get to good jobs that can drive business outcomes. So companies have often looked at labor budgets as the first place to cut when things get tough. They're big, they're juicy, you can cut them pretty quickly, and you don't see the effects for a while. You can make money for a long time with bad jobs, but eventually you cut into muscle. Service gets worse, and you end up in a vicious cycle that's really hard to get out of. And that's where many companies find themselves now. And I got to tell you, this was true 2 years ago, pre-COVID, when we had a really tight labor market. And then COVID has upended all of our assumptions about work. Companies that have had great success over the past years are having trouble. The New York Times recently had a great article on dollar stores, which have been proliferating across the US. They don't offer great jobs, and it's caught up with them. They're asking their managers to work 70 hours a week, salaried, so they're not getting any overtime, and these managers are quitting, and they can't open stores. And I think, you know, I live in Ipswich, Massachusetts, where we currently do not have power. I know many businesses can't open their full hours up here because they don't have enough workers. As we find ourselves in this really challenging COVID recovery period, bad jobs are impacting businesses every day, and good jobs are the way to build back better. So when we talk about the business case for good jobs, we look at the financial case, the competitive case, and the moral case. So many people have made the financial case for good jobs, and it's often really focused on the cost of turnover. And this is huge. This is why a lot of companies come to us, but the financial case is much broader than just turnover. We actually have a calculator on our website that can help any restaurants and retailers out there calculate the financial upside of good jobs. And this is how we really think about it. Great jobs can drive higher revenue. How? If you've got great service, long-time team members who know your clients, who are really able to get them what they want, who are able to make sure that their favorite dishes are consistent when they come to the restaurant, to make sure that all of your items are in stock, you're going to have more people coming more often, great word of mouth. You're going to have people buying more of your product, right? So you're going to be able to drive revenue when you have good jobs. And there's a lot of different ways to sort of dive in and calculate that, but revenue uplift is huge with good jobs. The second way that good jobs can drive great financial outcomes is cost mitigation. Bad jobs are expensive, right? So when you have, again, better jobs, higher turnover, better operational performance, if you're in retail, if you're in restaurants, you're going to have less shrink, less damage. If you're in manufacturing, you're going to have fewer quality issues, less material waste. You're going to have less shipping costs, right? If you're getting behind and you have to rush shipments, that can be really expensive. And really across any industry, you are going to have less turnover costs, fewer legal compliance, safety issues, reduced overtime costs. There's a whole lot of cost mitigation that comes with good jobs. Good jobs also drive better labor productivity. So we help companies simplify work and reduce non-value add tasks that can save hundreds, thousands of hours of work that can be then reinvested into wages and into strong service. So that is the financial case for good jobs. Definitely check out our calculator. And if you're not in retail or hospitality or restaurants, you can use the general model and framework to think about how good jobs can drive the financial case for your business. But the competitive case for good jobs is just as strong, if not stronger. So you can fake finances for a quarter, you can boost sales while having poor execution, but long-term competitive advantage comes with good jobs. So we look at two levers for competitiveness: adaptability and differentiation. So adaptability, my goodness, the last year and a half, right? With a global pandemic, with a racial reckoning here in the United States, the last 18 months have been incredibly difficult. And companies with lower turnover, better trained teams, they're better able to adapt when these big things come down the pike. But business is always changing, right? From new technology to new sort of regulations to investors increasingly asking a lot more questions about good jobs. Companies who already have them or who are working on getting them are really going to be well placed to adapt to a very rapidly changing business environment. And then there's differentiation. This one is huge. Good jobs and great service will differentiate you for customers, but also employees in a tight labor market. So I want to see hands here. How many people remember Circuit City? Anybody? Okay, yep. So Circuit City was one of the biggest electronics. I like the hands. Well done with Zoom. We have all learned how to use Zoom in the last year and a half. I love it. So you all remember Circuit City, but you can't go there today because they're closed. They had a good job strategy early in their development, and then they decided that they didn't want to invest in people anymore. They didn't want to invest in expertise and full-time staff who really knew the electronics. They went part-time. They stopped investing in people. They went from good to great to gone. How many people remember Best Buy? You probably do, because you can still go to them at any mall here in Massachusetts, right? 10 years ago, Hubert Joly joined them as CEO, and they were having a really challenging time. And he decided to double down on people, double down on service. That is how he was going to win with customers. Business boomed. So he said, the way we win is with advice, convenience, service, right? He wanted to amplify his team members' ability to really provide consultative selling to their customers, and he won. So other good jobs retailers that we study and work with, like Costco and Trader Joe's, they have tremendous levels of customer satisfaction. They invest in people because it's the right thing to do, but they also do it because it's how they win with customers. Good jobs is also going to differentiate you in a tough labor market. So we hear from a lot of companies, well, you know, we know what the market wage is, and we're going to pay a little bit above market. But market wages in low wage industries are not enough for frontline workers to live on. They are not going to be able to live stable lives, and they're not going to be able to show up in their best way at work. Sometimes they can't even show up at work because a high percentage of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency, like a flat tire, right? So market wages are not it. With every company we work with, we do a wage assessment using the MIT Living Wage Calculator, which looks at both the county you live in, your family size, and then has a basket of the basic living costs that you need. It's called the living wage. It probably shouldn't be called that. It should probably be called a subsistence wage because it doesn't include savings for retirement, for education, for buying a house, that great American dream. It doesn't include savings for emergencies, right? So this is very much just covering your basic living essentials. Many leaders are shocked by how many members of their team are not making a living wage. It's incredibly important. I encourage any employers on the call today, dive in, figure out where you are. Are you paying a living wage? You can disaggregate living wage analyses by gender and by race. It's really important in terms of equity and the equity conversation we're having. Dive into benefits uptake. Dive into what makes a good job for your team and understand if you're offering them a good job. That may be why it's challenging to hire. We've got a lot of great tools for this. So check out our website. We've got our wage analysis methodology on there. We've got an employee scorecard. We've got all sorts of things that you can check out that can help you drive good jobs. I want to end by saying it is a choice to offer good jobs. It is a choice to offer bad jobs. You can offer good jobs and do really well. There's a very strong business case for it. And you can offer bad jobs and you can do well, at least for a while. If you're an employer, check out our website, check out our tools, reach out. We can help you map out how to improve jobs and drive operational excellence for your business. If you're a policymaker, a workforce development leader, I encourage you to think about how you can make the good jobs choice easier for companies to make and harder for companies to offer bad jobs. So many carrots and stick levers that you can pull, from tax incentives for human capital investment to procurement requirements around job quality and so much more. There's also a bunch of great case studies out there on companies who've done this, who've gone from bad jobs to good in retail and manufacturing and call centers and more. And I am so thrilled to be able to pass it over to Rick, who is one of my business heroes. He offers fantastic jobs in the New York area and is super engaged in the community and in building good jobs across the state. So Rick, tell us all about your business case for great jobs.
Thanks, Sarah. I just want to share that Sarah and I participate in a fellowship at the Aspen Institute for Job Quality. And there's a lot of great information on the Aspen Institute website if you're interested. There are tools being developed, as she indicated, that are available to companies that are more progressive, that want to do a self-assessment and then make conscious decisions about how to improve job quality at their organization. So let me talk a little bit about some things that we're doing at Optimax. As Sarah points out, differentiation is key. And at Optimax, I encourage our leadership team to create a corporate culture where people want to work, where people want to come in and create value. So workforce development through the years has always been a challenge for us. Optimax is 30 years old. We're about 400 employees. And we grow an average of 25% each year. So like this year, we've hired a little over 50 people already. We still have about 50 job openings. Those are happy problems, but challenging problems. Some of the things that we do to increase workforce or build our workforce, we have paid internships, which is a really strong part of our workforce pipeline. We also have an optics precision manufacturing apprenticeship program. And we leverage the local community colleges and universities. We offer $5,000 tuition to each of our employees each year. And if someone reaches a point where they're interested in going for a master's degree, I think in every case, we've supported their master's degree 100%. Because through the years, one of the things that we found very challenging is identifying those people that have a real interest in taking on a leadership role. So anytime we find people that are interested in doing that, we really try to support them as best we can. One of the things that's really unfortunate in the workforce, and I think we're seeing it across America, is baby boomers are choosing to opt out, to retire early or not to play any longer. Some of them are already 70 years old. They were having fun and pandemic hit and they just decided to opt out. At Optimax, we've done a couple things to really help motivate the older workers. One of the things that I think is really unfortunate is in the early years of someone's career, they're learning a lot, their pay is increasing at a decent pace. But after 20 or 25 years, most people have plateaued. I don't care what industry you're in. It's just kind of how things work. You get to a point where um, you may be getting cost of living increases or no increase in pay each year at all. And so at Optimax, we created a special 25th anniversary gift where we give an employee a block of phantom stock options. This is an internal calculation for the value. It has a value the day that we issue it. Over 5 years, it vests to the extent that we can grow the value of the business. On their 30th anniversary, they'll get paid out that value for their phantom stock options. So it's a way to put the giddy up in the step of these people that have been with us through thick and thin, that have decades of experience. And we really want to encourage them to show up and leverage their expertise to help train and nurture the younger employees that we have in the organization so that we can grow the business faster. One of the other unique things that we did, we created what we call a dream team. These are guys that are folks that are, you know, up there in years. They're not interested in working 40 hours a week anymore, but maybe they're willing to come in for 15 or 20 hours. Some people call them the lunch bunch because they tend to show up around 10 a.m. and head home around 2. But again, they have decades of experience and they can share with the younger employees and help us, help those younger employees grow. Something that, I think a couple decades ago, you wouldn't find business owners talking about, but I think can be really helpful for employees is a wellness program. Our HR team does a great job establishing corporate policy and adhering to state and federal regulations, but the wellness team is a grassroots efforts within Optimax that addresses 5 different pillars: career development, personal financial security, emotional, social, and physical well-being, so that we're systematically trying to help our employees, each one of our employees, find a good work-life balance. And it's not just about coming into work and somebody cracking a whip on them and trying to get them to create value, but it's about creating an environment where people want to come into work and they want to create value. They want to earn respect and get paid a fair wage. And we do that every day at Optimax. The other thing that we're doing that I think is really unique is each month, at the end of the month, we close the books at Optimax and we take 25% of profit and share it with our workforce. And that's something that we've been doing it for 25 years. For the past several years, that the monthly bonus check for our employees is a little over $1,000 on average. So it's a really powerful way to make sure that as the corporation, as the team develops, creates value and builds wealth, we're sharing that with our workers as we go. And so last year, one of the things that I did to make sure that we continue to do that for decades to come, my business partner and I gifted our voting shares to an employee ownership trust with a perpetual purpose. And there are 3 tenets of the purpose: never sell the business, always share profits with the employees. And the third tenet is that the trustees, while they have nothing to do with the operations of the business, they do have the authority and responsibility to make sure that the leadership of Optimax is working to create innovation, to create value in the marketplace, to create new jobs. Anyone that's misbehaving on the leadership team, the trustees have the authority to kick them off the team. And so we think that with this game plan through a perpetual purpose trust, we're able to set the stage for decades of prosperity. And we've got a great team at Optimax. It's just knocking out of the park. Here in the pandemic, coming into it, we were really worried that business was going to fall off, and actually we had about 30% growth last year and again this year. So it's been really good for us, and some of the programs that we're doing that differentiate us from other employers in the region have helped us, bring on new employees and continue to build workforce that's needed to meet our customers' needs. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Sarah, and I want to thank you for the time to just share a few things that we're doing at Optimax that help us be successful.
Thanks so much, Rick. Super helpful. I'm loving all of the activity in the chat, and I'm seeing something from JVS. I meant to mention they've got a fantastic benchmarking index that puts job quality metrics out there for some of their employers, reach out to Mandy, reach out to Jerry, learn about that, because that is one thing that's really going to help companies understand where they are with their competitors and help drive that business case. So thanks to all of you. Really excited to learn more the rest of today.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Rick, for sharing those concrete strategies with us, and hope that we can utilize them in companies throughout Massachusetts and also around the country. We're pleased to have people from around the country with us today. I'd like to bring on Bob Bauer. We're a little behind on the program, so we're going to try to speed things up a little bit and turn it over to Bob to introduce two of our trusted leaders and partners in the legislature. Thank you, Bob. You're muted, Bob.
How many times have we heard that on Zoom? Thank you, Kathy. We've had so many great speakers today. I'm honored to be able to introduce our good friend and a great leader, the President of the Massachusetts Senate, Senator Karen Spilka.
Hi, I'm Karen Spilka, President of the Massachusetts State Senate. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak to all of you today for the 12th Annual Massachusetts Jobs and Workforce Summit. I want to also acknowledge today's other speakers and my great partners in government: Labor Secretary Marty Walsh, Assistant Speaker Catherine Clark, and Speaker of the House of Representatives Ron Mariano. These are trying times with daunting challenges before us, but the collaboration between federal, state, and local government has never been stronger. And so I want to thank my colleagues for their leadership throughout the pandemic on the critical issues facing our economy and our workforce. We have learned so much during this pandemic, and it's heartening and exciting to see we're all on the same page when it comes to finding solutions for how to ensure our economic recovery is both just and equitable. So I want to thank you, a big thank you to Catherine, her team, and member partners at Workforce Solutions Group for a brilliant report detailing this very challenge before us, and for the recommendations that were developed. Your advocacy will play a very important role in the discussion of reemployment as we work to get to what I like to call back to better. Prior to becoming Senate President, I was chair of the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and during the last major recession, I was Senate Chair of the Joint Committee on Economic Development and Emerging Technologies. In both positions, I was tasked with finding solutions and guiding recovery strategies, just as Massachusetts and the country faced economic uncertainty. And so this is very familiar territory for me in so many ways. This past year, we've been hard at work pushing for investments in career developments for adults and students across the Commonwealth. This session, I created the Senate Committee on Reimagining Massachusetts Post-Pandemic Resiliency to guide the Senate as we continue to recover. Earlier this month, that committee released its findings, and I sincerely encourage all of you to read them and engage with us as we chart our path forward. As many of you know, the Senate and House have engaged in a transparent process to learn how to best invest the historic funding associated with the American Rescue Plan. Balancing a sense of urgency with thoughtfulness, we have worked to include the public's perspective in our decision-making by gathering their feedback through hours and hours of testimony on where to spend these one-time dollars. Our changing employment landscape was a reoccurring theme, not surprisingly, in these conversations, particularly as it relates to helping our hardest hit sectors and communities. And as you highlight in your report, we in the legislature are also centering equity in our economic future by finding ways to reform or boost access to our critical programs. With an unemployment rate hovering at 5% and higher amongst our Black and brown communities, we know we have a ways to go to engage our many skilled and talented workers looking for their next opportunity. Key to reaching those goals is identifying and funding job training programs so that our post-pandemic workforce is well prepared and ready to get to work. But none of this is possible without the internet. So we must continue to expand broadband capabilities to connect our many talent pools with good jobs, with living wages. This formula of training, preparing, and providing the right tools for employment is desperately needed in one of the key areas that has been a priority of mine, our care economy. In many ways, it is like our infrastructure, because just like our roads, bridges, and railroads, we simply cannot fully recover until our care workforce needs are met. We know many of the burdens of care fall upon women, particularly women of color. So this is a matter of both gender, economic, and racial justice. Addressing the needs of this sector and finally really valuing this as a career path is critical to ensuring that we do not repeat the mistakes of our past. After a year and a half of isolation, we must find ways that we can connect and create a system of intergenerational care. This won't be created overnight, I know that, and we've only just begun to think about what it can be. But I am committed to this moonshot for our recovery and for our future. I have said before, and I will say it again, Massachusetts' best days lie ahead. Events like today's Workforce Summit is a key part of how we craft our roadmap forward. So again, I want to applaud your work and again welcome your advocacy as we chart this new path for the future of work together. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate, and remember, my physical and my virtual door is always open. Stay healthy and be well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senate President Spilka. We've been really blessed in Massachusetts with our State House leaders. Senator Spilka is a former social worker, and Speaker Mariano, who's coming up next, is a former public school teacher. The House released their bill yesterday about how to designate the federal relief funds, the ARPA money, and $750 million has been targeted for workforce development, including job training, many of the priorities that we have been advocating for in our rapid reemployment for a just and equitable recovery report. I believe Caitlin put it in the chat for us. So without further ado, Speaker Mariano, thank you.
Hello, I'm House Speaker Ron Mariano. I'm thrilled to be addressing you today for the first time as the House Speaker. First, I'd like to thank the Workforce Solutions Group, especially the executive team and Director Kathy Mainzer, for your advocacy work on workforce development programs in the Commonwealth. Your work has helped the House develop numerous budgets and countless pieces of legislation that have made our workforce pipeline stronger and more responsive to our state's economy. Since I became Speaker in the final days of 2020, one of my top priorities has been job creation and workforce development. As we continue to navigate through the COVID-19 pandemic and the monumental effect it has had on our economy, we must ensure that Massachusetts workers are prepared for whatever comes next. One of the ways we have done this is through the state budget. I am proud that the legislature fully funded many of the priority items of the Workforce Solutions Group. Most notably, we included $17 million for the Workforce Competitive Trust Fund, which encouraged collaboration between educational institutions, workforce investment boards, and local employers. This represents a 70% increase over the previous fiscal year. We also included funding for career technical institutes, career centers, youth job programs, and STEM education and training. I know that these initiatives will go a long way in ensuring that Massachusetts workers and industries can compete in the growing global economy. One industry that I believe could be truly transformational for the Massachusetts workforce is offshore wind. In 2015, I joined a group of legislators on a trip to Denmark to learn more about offshore wind. And I really began to understand the impact and the importance of this technology, both for the future of our planet and for our economy. The US Department of Energy singled out the coast of Massachusetts as having the largest technical potential for offshore wind of any state because of our high winds and shallow waters. Since 2016, we've authorized the procurement of 5,600 megawatts of offshore wind by 2027. And we've made big investments in our workforce. Most recently, and of most importance to this group, our budget allocated $13 million to an offshore wind energy career training trust fund. And our landmark climate legislation passed last year gives $12 million annually to support women and environmental justice populations pursue clean energy careers. I know these investments will have huge payoffs for Massachusetts workers and will make Massachusetts more competitive in the growing renewable energy industry. When we support workers, communities, families, and individuals across the Commonwealth benefit. The House will continue its commitment to workers as we move into the final half of our legislative session. I hope you really enjoy the rest of the summit. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lou Finfer. I'm with the Massachusetts Communities Action Network and one of the founding groups of the Workforce Solutions Group. And my first question is a straw poll. Raise your hand if you've been stressed out over COVID the last year and a half. Raise your hand. It's a straw poll. I think we have a lot of people who would vote for that. So today's panel is on the impact of the pandemic on youth and teens, a big part of our present and our future. I want to introduce our panelists. We have DeAndre Arnold, who is the Associate Program Coordinator of the youth organization called Teen Empowerment, which is a very respected youth organization based in Roxbury. And our other panelist is Katora Brewster, who's the Executive Director of the youth organizing group called I Have a Future. I Have a Future, in 2008, the youth jobs budget stood at $4 million, and through annual organizing and rallies and meeting with legislators, That budget is now 24 million today. And just yesterday, with continued effort by I Have a Future and allies, the House agreed to fund $40 million in the ARPA federal budget proposal to go to YouthWorks youth jobs. So that's going to help greatly the number of youth jobs, year-round summer jobs, and a new program for 18 to 24-year-olds. So let me give it over to Katora and DeAndre for a conversation on this.
Hello, everyone, and good morning. Again, well, that was quite an introduction, Lou, so thank you for that. And thank you so much to the WSG team. Happy to be here with you, DeAndre, as we have a little conversation, letting them know about the impact that the past year has had on young people and some of the recommendations that we have for the folks today and in terms of how to move forward. So I can kick us off and then, DeAndre, just jump in.
Do you think, Katora? Do you think?
As Lou said, I'm here to represent I Have a Future, which is an inspiring movement of youth and allies across Massachusetts that are working to increase youth jobs opportunities and end youth criminalization. Part of the way that our program functions, we serve middle and high school students and empower them with youth organizing skills so that they in turn move our coalition to do some of these larger wins that Lou touched upon. And I Have a Future started in 2008 in reaction to a proposed 50% cut to youth jobs across the state. And what we are noticing in light of the pandemic, we're pretty much in a lot of ways up against the same challenges of losing a group of talented young people due to months of disconnection and lack of community. And so one of the ways that we try to kind of work with that is really wrestle with the question with our youth around, were we really just waiting for the return to normal? Or are we ready to build something different? And so, in the summer, traditionally we hold programming Monday through Thursday, for a set amount of time. And that was good and fine, but we also wanted to really recognize the reality that our youth were experiencing on a day-to-day and change the way we were organizing to really meet their needs. And so we started to create or embed spaces within our regular programming spaces to have youth really talk about what they're experiencing rather than kind of just pushing through work. The last 18 months was unfounded. Like none of us had experienced any of this before. And so to completely kind of dismiss how much of an impact it was affecting young people was really a disservice to our work. And once we did really incorporate those spaces for youth to just really lament with each other and be in community intentionally, that's when we really saw a lot more folks feeling engaged and connected to something larger than themselves. Because we had already, we provide the analysis to share that even before COVID, a lot of these disparities exist. However, due to COVID, it just exposed those disparities even more. And so, I think a lot of it was just making sure that we continue to engage with young people consistently and then intentionally bring them into community. The last thing I'll share before I pass it, no, not the last thing, but one of the other things that I wanted to share was that, we, as we are kind of segueing back into somewhat of a normal flow in terms of doing more in-person projects in meetings and stuff like that, we had to really reckon with the reality that a lot of students, and even ourselves as organizers, experience a lot of social isolation and didn't really know how to deal with that. And instead, our normal impulse is just to jump back into things, but we really have to talk about and kind of systemize how we're really dealing with social isolation, and how additional mental health support can really be embedded in a part of our culture across the board. So I'm gonna hold more, but I'm gonna allow DeAndre to share their perspective.
Appreciate you, Katora. Good morning. I appreciate everyone for those who have spoken earlier. My name is DeAndre Avant, so not DeAndre Arnold, DeAndre Avant. I'm an associate program coordinator for the Center of Teen Empowerment, and I work for the Boston location. So we have 3 locations, one in Rochester, New York, in Somerville, Massachusetts, and in Boston. I've been working with the organization for about a year and a half now. I started working with teen empowerment when I was 19 years old. I had gotten the position as youth organizer on my graduation date, actually, and I graduated during the pandemic. I just got promoted over the summer to become a staff, which is the position I'm in right now. And what my specific, thank you, what my specific position is to kind of work in the arts department as a choreographer, even though I have a diploma in visual arts from Boston Arts Academy. And we specifically work with youth at Teen Empowerment uh, and arts programs such as TE Studios, where we do dancing and music and arts related activities. And then we also do violence prevention and intervention. And we use those things to kind of help the youth connect their social work through a method of trying to bring people together through community work. So we hire youth from 14 to 21, and we'll do it either during the school year or during the summer. And their job is to basically interact with the community and kind of just talk about events. As a matter of fact, we have a movie coming up on November 6th, which is next Saturday at the AMC Theater in downtown, where we'll be talking about senseless smoke and the violence going on in Boston from a youth perspective. So many things, but we're not here to really talk too much. If you guys really want to know, I can tell you one-on-one, but let's just get to this conversation because I'm ready.
Yeah, so DeAndre, what would you say, based on, the work that you've done over the past year, how has COVID really impacted, the ability to create arts that kind of get us motivated and get us going?
It's honestly about the passion and the stories and the feelings. So arts is more so about just giving a message to people. It's kind of like a story in a way. And the way that pretty much happens is we let our youth kind of discuss in their audition and their interviews what issues are most important to them and how do they want to address it. And a lot of the youth tend to think that arts or like violence prevention intervention is the best way to kind of communicate or like resolve some of these issues. So we'll have them work on many projects throughout the year to kind of just address what they feel needs to be addressed. And that's just pretty much it. How do you feel about it, Couture, with what you guys do at I Have a Future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the beautiful things that I've seen that teen empowerment does flawlessly is really like translate, the day to day like challenges that youth experience and kind of translate it into these like beautiful expressions that really get us like, oh yeah, I've also experienced that too, or oh yeah, I've also felt that feeling too. Um, and yeah, I mean that's pretty much the bread and butter of the way that we organize. We have to build community, we have to build relationships with people. A lot of the youth, they were, almost siloed in their own rooms and being on Zoom on a day to day, not really connected with other students. And so, spaces like Teen Empowerment, I Have a Future are allow youth who are going through similar challenges, allow them to be in spaces with one another that are reflective of, what they're going through. One of the things that we also had shifted around was just, again, I mentioned this briefly, but making sure that there was more mental health support and thinking through, the aspects of burnout within our organizing culture. And yeah, I just wanted to hear a little bit more about, I guess, from you also, if that's something that's been brought up on the teen empowerment side.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Because I remember I had originally tried to apply for teen empowerment in 2019. This was before the pandemic had started, but I didn't get the position right away. I had to wait a year because I had personal responsibilities that couldn't allow me to work at teen empowerment. And when I got the position at teen empowerment, it was during the virtual time. So my entire experience has been mostly virtual. And because of that, a lot of the youth have felt like they couldn't give their 100% because of the fact that it was virtual and everyone was just so accustomed to being in person. And I know for a fact the youth were very stressed with having to transfer from the middle of the school year right onto Zoom virtually. Now I know a lot of students have talked about wanting to do school virtually, but I didn't think they was really thinking to a certain extent of what that would look like until we was put in that situation of having to do virtual to continue what we would normally do on a regular basis. So I know that our doctors always tell our youth that they're supposed to have a certain amount of screen time. And forgive me if you hear extra noise in the background, but I know for a fact that youth get burned out for sure if they're so attached to a screen, especially if nowadays, if you don't get the vaccine and don't want to go to school and you're doing it home virtually, it can definitely tire you out for sure. Because I know depending on what grade you're in, with the amount of homework you get, after school classes, it's a whole thing. What do you feel about it, Katora?
We have about a minute left. So I want to leave the group with just some like recommendations that we have in terms of, what we've been able to gather up until this point. And I really think it's really important to create spaces for people to kind of challenge the current structures and then also innovate and create new structures within programming that you provide for them. Because if we continue to push the agenda that things just have to go back to what we've experienced as normal, like we're not really making room for all of the new learnings that we've gathered during this time. That's actually really beautiful when you look at it in that perspective. So that is my specific recommendation. Do you want to share yours?
Yeah, just so we can wrap this up, because I feel like Katora is a really great person to have a conversation with, and she's definitely highlighted a lot of great points within our conversation. So what I will say is that I'm very happy. I'm not happy that we're in the pandemic and that it happened and that we had to transfer to Zoom, but I am happy that we're now starting to work on a great positive change. And I just hope it continues to strive from here and that we can eventually reach a better, more healthy normal versus the normal that we was growing up with as, from what youth was like before up till now as adults.
Katora and DeAndre, thanks so much for sharing your stories and helping us to begin to understand better the challenges that youth are walking with courageously in this time. Thank you so much for what you said and what your organizations are doing day to day to build leadership and to get resources for the youth issues that are needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lou, and thank you, Katora and DeAndre, for your leadership in that conversation this morning. We really appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. My name is Liz Schwab. I head up external affairs for Google out of our Cambridge office. And it's my pleasure to be with Andre this morning to help kick off our next panel, which will be focused on investing in a resilient workforce. Little did we know what new types of meaning resilient could take on. And as we work to make sure that our workforce is not only resilient, but able to thrive in the faces of all of these changes that the pandemic has brought to our economy, I know that I join all of you in being incredibly thankful that one of our next speakers is at the helm of the state's response. And that is, of course, Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development for the Commonwealth, Rosalyn Acosta. The Secretary leads the administration's efforts to ensure workers and employers have the tools, training, and resources needed to succeed in our economy. Again, a mission that is so incredibly critical today. I know we're running a little bit behind on the agenda, and the secretary is certainly no stranger to this conference or this crowd. So I will skip through her bio ahead to a quick thank you on behalf of the Google team here in Massachusetts. We have had the pleasure of working with the secretary's team on initiatives like job search features and how to better integrate our tools with the state resources and data to professional certificate programs underneath our Grow with Google program. And so we thank you for that. Before we let you start with your comments, I will hand the virtual mic over to Andre to introduce the session's co-panelists.
Thank you, Liz. My name is Andre Green. I'm the Executive Director of SkillWorks, an original member and sponsor of the Workforce Solutions Group. And it is my pleasure and honor to introduce Dr. Rachel Lipson, Director of the Project on Work at Harvard, an interdisciplinary project at Harvard studying the intersection of education policy and labor policy. Over the last year, you may have had the pleasure of reading some of Dr. Lipson's work. She has been emerged this year, especially as a deep and profound thinker on the future of work and our responsibility to change to meet this moment. And again, we are pressed for time, so I will not belabor the point. So thank you, Rachel, for joining us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Secretary Costa.
Well, thank you, Liz, and thank you, Andre. Rachel, you and I have a heck of a task right now following Keturah and DeAndre. It was actually wonderful hearing from them. You know, I don't think anyone on this Zoom call today, you know, has ignored the impact that this pandemic has had on our youth. It has been tremendous. And to hear that perspective directly from Keturah and DeAndre, for me, is always very touching because, you know, frankly, we as adults feel a lot of that same screen burnout, a lot of that same isolation at times, and we potentially have other ways of dealing and coping with that. But our youth has had to do a lot of pivoting this year between screen time, back to school, screen time, back to school. So kudos to them to have the courage to come on this today and give us their perspective. So Rachel and I are going to tag team today and sort of have an interactive conversation. I'm really pleased to have Rachel as my co-host here today, and we're going to do a little bit of an interview style thing. So Rachel and I have partnered together in so many different aspects, trying to understand the impacts of this pandemic. And obviously the pandemic has had a tremendous impact on our workforce here in Massachusetts. So Rachel, I'm going to pass the mic to you and we can get started.
Thank you, Secretary, and thank you, Andre and Liz, for those kind introductions, and thanks to the Workforce Solutions Group for hosting us here today for this important event. It's really an honor to be in this conversation with Secretary Acosta, who Liz mentioned is really at the helm of so many important efforts here in the state to ensure that all residents in Massachusetts can benefit from their recovery. And I'm excited about the topic of our conversation, investing in a resilient workforce. Honestly, I think this is one of the most important issues out there. As the economy changes, how do we ensure that all workers and learners and employers and educators have the opportunities and supports that they need, not just to withstand these shifts and changes, but really to thrive? So Secretary, I know this is an issue that you personally have been so focused on as a leader, and excited to dig in and hear your reflections on where we've been and where we are going forward. So it really was such a great conversation from Keturah and DeAndre about the impacts of COVID-19 on young people. And I was hoping maybe we could expand out and think about the broader population here in Massachusetts. We all know that the impact of this pandemic has not been equal. Some groups have really felt the brunt of the hit more strongly than others, and wanted to hear from you, Secretary, how you're seeing this landscape regarding Massachusetts adults in the workforce, who in particular has been disproportionately affected by the pandemic.
No, thank you, Rachel. And I think several of our speakers already have spoken a little bit about the disparities in this pandemic. And and it is striking. Most of us know that a lot of the income inequalities that we're seeing today have been there. So the pandemic didn't create that, but it has it is really shining a very bright light on the inequities that we're seeing across our cities and towns here in the Commonwealth. And I think most of you have read the statistics about Latinos. They represent a large percentage of those in the lower wage jobs, like the retail, accommodation, food services, administrative support, waste management. And all of these areas took a really huge hit during the pandemic. The average median salary for those jobs are approximately $30,000. We know that a lot of these folks ended up on unemployment benefits. A lot of them were the federal pandemic unemployment benefits that all ended September 4th. And we had about 300,000 people that fell off all kinds of benefits on September 4th. And what continues to be striking about that, and I think we heard from Catherine Clark, that 50% of those were women. So women have left the labor force in very large numbers. Women tend to work in lower wage sectors. National data from the 2020 census estimates that 17% of female workers are working in low wage jobs compared to 7% of men. And these jobs, again, typically pay about $30,000 or less. So we can see, how childcare plays into this. And if you're making that kind of salary, how do you think about going back to work with the high cost of childcare? We're also seeing this in our racial and ethnic disparities remain persistent, as demonstrated by our unemployment rates. So when we look at our unemployment rates, we all tend to look at averages, but it's important to dig deeper into those averages. And we know that for this September, our 12-month moving average unemployment rate for Latinos is the highest at 11%. For Blacks, it is 9%, and that's compared to whites at 5.7%. We also know that coming out of this pandemic, and this is very striking to me, coming out of this pandemic, job recovery for women is expected to take 18 or more months longer than for men. And for people of color, for our Black and Latino communities, that recovery could take up to 2 years. So one of the things that our office is doing is we're really diving very deeply into data. Data is extremely important, and it really helps us identify the disparities, growth and declines, but also provides insights through analysis that guides us toward addressing the issues we are talking about today. So I want to mention that our Economic Research Division and our chief economists have been leading a new initiative called the Diversity Dashboard. And the dashboard will be ready very, very soon. And this will provide data on issues faced by racial, ethnic, and gender groups, and will keep us informed on workforce strategies and upskilling needs. So the first dashboard will focus on Latinos in Massachusetts and should be available in the coming weeks. The second will focus on Blacks with a projected launch of early 2022, and the third on women will follow shortly thereafter. We really feel, as I know all of you do, that basing our workforce policies on hard evidence and hard data is the most effective way to have better solutions.
Yeah, it's so great to have folks in leadership who are thinking about evidence-based solutions. And I think similarly on this data front, Massachusetts recently released a statewide report on future of work. For folks on the line who haven't checked it out yet, I would encourage you to give it a read. We'll drop it in the chat box. I think there's a lot of important data in there to just help contextualize some of these changes that we're seeing in the state's economy. And one of the key themes that the report really highlights, and this is consistent with some of our research at the Project on Workforce, and we've actually worked jointly with the state on some of these issues, is this growth of hybrid and remote work. And understanding these changes, it doesn't matter just for the workers who can work remotely or hybrid. We know there's going to be impacts on everyone else as well, for the businesses that have been attached to traditional office work, for housing, for transportation, for cost of living here in Massachusetts. But there's also a lot of opportunities here, as you spoke about mothers, more flexibility for caregivers, bringing job growth to new parts of the state. So as we have this conversation on Zoom today, I would love to hear just how you and the administration are thinking about this issue, and what are your plans to kind of proactively address these developments and to kind of get ahead of the game here.
Wow, that's a great question, Rachel. And first of all, I know that remote is become very popular. Actually, our report, and I do encourage you to read it, the Future of Work report, does show us that about 30% of folks here in the Commonwealth are working remotely and have the ability to work remotely. Often those require a college degree. It also really underscores the inequities that we're seeing in education, housing, and the workforce. And it really underscores the interdependency that workforce training programs have on so many other factors. I mean, when we think about housing, when we think about childcare, if people cannot afford to live here, they may not stay here. So the governor's plan really was very comprehensive. As you all know, we filed a bill. The governor filed a bill for $2.9 billion. And that really includes a very comprehensive look at what do we need to do to help people stay in Massachusetts and thrive in Massachusetts. There was $1 billion in there for home ownership and housing production, $350 million for downtown development and revitalization. There's $100 million for tourism and cultural facilities, $100 million for increased broadband. We heard Senate President talk about the importance of accessibility, right, and in broadband. 240 million in workforce development and about 640 million in childcare improvements. So these are all really important items in order for us to be able to keep people here, make sure that we're training them. And the 240 million really includes a bunch of different things. It's entry-level credentials, it's mid-level credentials. It also includes the important wraparound services like ESOL, like work readiness. We are, since the pandemic hit our Latino community so hard, and folks that don't necessarily have English as their first language, we know that ESOL is needed more than ever. And we know that in order to have successful training programs, we need to integrate those work readiness programs and those ESOL programs. So the House just came out with their bill a couple of days ago, and it included many of the workforce programs that we were advocating for, and I'm very grateful to the House for that. As you all know, now it goes to the Senate, and we're really hoping that this gets done in this legislative year. We also have grants that are out on the street right now through our Commonwealth Corporation. So if you guys are looking for more information on that, please go on to our ComCore site. But I'm excited about the work that we're doing, and all of this is really, it's in collaboration with so many different stakeholders. None of this we can do alone. And I will start by saying that all of these programs absolutely need an employer on the other end. If we do not have an employer on the other end, these training programs will not succeed. We cannot do training just for training's sake. We need to make sure that we have an employer at the other end to hire these folks. We need our community-based organizations involved. We need our entire mass hire system involved. And we need our education institutions, our community colleges, our vocational schools, our state universities. This is a moment for us, right, where we have resources. Now we just need to make sure that we're coordinating it and that we don't lack imagination in how we come out of this pandemic.
So I know we're already over today and want to make sure we have some time left for folks to convene and network and chat in groups. Maybe I'll close out with one final question, which is just around, I think, the uniqueness of this particular moment. You've already highlighted so many of the key changes we're seeing in the economy. There's also evidence right now that this might be a moment where technological change is actually accelerating, and a time when we really need to invest to be future ready and think about what's going to be required going forward. Yet at the same time, we know in prior recessions that unfortunately there is often a one-time influx of funding. We saw that for the workforce system coming out of the Great Recession through the stimulus, but not really a fundamental rethinking or acceleration of investment and change. So I'm interested to hear from you, Secretary. is this another moment like the past, or is this time different? And if it is different, why? And what's the role that all of us can play in helping to kind of set that foundation for a better future?
Well, Rachel, I think I'll say simply that if we don't do it differently this time, then shame on us, because we do have an incredible opportunity. And in past recessions, the workforce piece of it, even though everyone talks about workforce as their greatest asset, has always been anemically funded nationally, and it has been anemically funded in our state too. So I think we have to take a little responsibility for that. If we do not do things differently this time around, I think we'll have repercussions, negative ones, for decades to come here in Massachusetts. We have a real opportunity here, and I am optimistic, and I live obnoxiously optimistic, but I'm optimistic because certainly for my first time in my 30+ career, I see a level of awareness from our employers, from our stakeholders in general, that I have never seen before. An awareness on the inequities in our system, an awareness on the importance of women in workforce, right? When I was having my 5 children in the 90s and 2000s, it was my problem. It wasn't my business's problem. It was my problem. That tenor has changed. So that awareness makes me optimistic. The availability of jobs right now that we have 250,000 available jobs right now in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That makes me optimistic. And then lastly, we have this other thing called ARPA. So we do not have a lack of monetary resources right now. We just have to be smart. We have to be coordinated, and we have to make this last. This can't be a once and done thing. And the proposals that we have are certainly for the next 3 to 5 years. But my expectation is that will create infrastructural change that can carry on beyond 2026. So I'm really appreciative of all of you being here today and listening. I could talk about these programs forever. We didn't even touch on apprenticeship programs that are so dear to my heart. But another way I think that we recover well from this pandemic with the help of our employers. So Rachel, thank you for this. I always love chatting with you, and I know we're running late, but Kathy didn't give us another hour to chat.
Thank you, Secretary. And the state is lucky to have you at the helm, and completely agree that it's going to require not just government, but employers and educators and really all of us coming together around this moment and the challenges and the opportunities ahead. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
I want to thank you both for what proves to be a all too brief but utterly stimulating conversation. Want to echo the Secretary's words that if we don't do different this time, shame on us. And so thank you for your wisdom, your leadership. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Danielle Kim to guide us through the next part of our agenda. Danielle?
Great. Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Secretary Acosta, Rachel, Liz. I feel so inspired and motivated, and just I feel like all the gears are turning in my head with ideas and inspiration. So thank you so much. My name is Danielle Kim. I'm the Public Policy Director at the United Way and a proud member of the Workforce Solutions Group. I now have the pleasure of moving us into our 6 inspiring and really fascinating breakout groups that we have prepared. So shortly, you'll see a pop-up at the bottom of your screen. You can click on the icon breakout groups, and there will be 6 options that you can self-select into. Our first breakout group will focus on skill training pipelines and career technical institutes. The second breakout session will focus on that issue that we just heard about, which is the importance of ESOL for work. The third group will focus on closing the digital divide. The fourth is fully funding workforce development and hearing more about the infrastructure bill that's moving right now. The fifth is on advocacy at the state level to fund affordable childcare. And the sixth is connecting employers to training and workforce development resources. These breakout rooms will run from now until 12:15. So I encourage you now to opt into one of these amazing conversations and continue the dialogue that we've been having today. Thank you so much. And if you have any technological troubles, we encourage you to stay in this main group, and our internal staff will help you navigate to the appropriate breakout room.